A state of mountains, a state of mind. The Rocky Mountain Way beckoned, and we answered. Dare I say I live in the wrong state, and this trip revealed why.
Today was a long day. I had 4.5 hours of sleep. We drove from Kansas City to Montrose. It was 835 miles, took us just over 15 hours to do. Originally, we were going to drive to Colorado Springs, stop, and then tomorrow make the drive to Ouray, but we decided to push on through so that tomorrow we get the most trail time. Personally, I'm pretty tired. My ball joints I had installed last week were still getting broken in, so they were quite loose for most of the drive. It was white knuckle steering on the highway, hitting bumps and veering off. And a couple of times the ABS sensor would go off and it'd lurch me to the side. And I'm pretty tired from fighting that today. So I'm looking forward to getting a nice, great night's sleep after my mountain house meal of beef stroganoff noodles. Tomorrow's gonna be an awesome day. You see that? That trail? That's just our campsite. The road is 100 meters right there. I mean, look how muddy that is. We're going to drive hundreds of miles on trails like this through Colorado the next week. It's going to be filthy.
The Colorado Backcountry Discovery Route was pioneered by motorcycle riders. It runs from the Four Corners to Wyoming. Restricted by time, we picked up the trail outside Ouray. We took a quick drive down Highway 550, a paved shelf road. Then we started the journey north on Corkscrew Gulch and Cinnamon Pass towards Lake City, which is the southern portion of the Alpine Loop. Last year, I took my family across Engineer Pass, so it was neat completing the loop this trip. Though not as scenic in my opinion, the route still offered expansive views and classic mining ruins. We made Lake City early and pushed north towards Pitkin. The landscape morphed, arid mountains flattened, and golden forest sprouted from the land. We descended to half-hour elevation from before Lake City, which peaked at 13,000 feet. Bulbous clouds draped the horizon. Rich, a co-host of the 4x4 podcast, introduced me to the off-road community in 2010. He used to wheel an 07 JKU and transitioned into overlanding. He had a Tacoma but wasn't pleased with the interior space or performance and traded in on a 2017 Dodge Rebel with a 5.7-liter Hemi. The truck accommodates his family better and he has power to spare. We pulled off to camp near Upper Dome Reservoir. We covered 150 trail miles, over double what we had planned for the day. The marked road took us down a hill that tested the Rebel's ground clearance. Boulders were indistinguishable from bushes. The road ended at a bridge made of future Pinterest projects and a closed gate.
Nah, I am not driving over that. And the gate's closed.
We turned back to find alternative accommodations.
Okay, we go back up.
Tell me if it looks like there's an actual trail over there before you head up.
After years as hood ornaments, I resurrected my Hellas to light the way. We Jeepers are obsessed with adding lights to our rigs that are seldom used, if ever. In hindsight, we could have driven around to the campground, but what we found instead was well worth the sidetrack, which is something I relish about overlanding. The night was absolutely still, not even a whisper of a breeze. Wildlife respected the peace too, and so we slept hearing nothing louder than our own breathing and the steady turning of the earth. Day 2. As the golden sun rose, it woke the fall colors. Our campsite was nestled against the tree line on the cusp of a valley. We took our time before leaving. So far, we've traveled 150 miles. The day's plan was to gas up in Pitkin, take one of 3 routes to Buena Vista, and reach Leadville before sunset. We rolled into Pitkin for fuel, only to learn the town lost power. It was a reminder to plan redundancy into our fuel stops. While discussing if we could make the next town for gas, the electricity returned and we filled up. Hancock Pass was our first technical section of the trip. The Forest Service didn't recommend pickups.
No pickups.
We decided to try, and then turn back if it got tough on the Rebel. It was interesting observing how each vehicle handled the rocks. The Jeep and Rebel had similar ground clearance at 10 inches, but the Jeep's articulation and sway bar disconnect gave it the advantage. The Rebel had to navigate the terrain more cautiously, whereas the Jeep could point and go. But the Rebel pulled through and easily tackled the trail. As we scaled the pass, we had another demonstration of the suspension differences between the 2 rigs. The JK's Metalcloak lift kept all tires grounded. The Rebel's stock suspension didn't.
Whoa, little passenger. You're good, little passenger. Forward.
But the traction control did its job and compensated.
You're good. You're good. Nice. Come on, forward. Little passenger. Passenger. Passenger there.
At 12,000 feet, we climbed into some weather. Wind pelted us with little ice balls, like thrown rice at a wedding. I was in shorts, and my wedding bells were frozen. An instant later, we were off the mountain and through Buena Vista. The arid terrain felt like Moab, with dry undulations and crispy vegetation. We were racing the sun to Leadville. An hour into Road 311, we came to a closed area sign. A logging truck had us guessing at its legitimacy, but we turned back regardless. Running out of daylight, we took the highway north to camp at Twin Lakes. At camp, I'd made my classic dinner of ramen and canned chicken.
Gets me every time.
Day 3. The sun rose with ferocity that was matched only by the biting breeze. Although wind was incessant, it made you feel transparent because it went right through you. Twin Lakes was a great little gem. Ample, yet secluded sites made for a cozy campground. It would make an excellent base camp for exploring Colorado's tallest mountain, Mount Elbert, which is a 6.5-mile hike away. Today's plan was to conquer as many miles as possible towards Steamboat Springs, which was 200 miles away and north of I-70. The trails were mostly maintained roads, so we wrongly assumed it would be easy. Our GMRS radios made spotting easier because we could hear each other over the wind.
A little more passenger right there, and straighten out, and you're good.
That wasn't bad at all. Good spotting.
Each trip I grow fonder of my Jeep and how well it handles the trails while loaded. The suspension does a fantastic job, even with the top-heavy rig. On Hagerman Pass we crossed the Continental Divide, which separates river systems that drain to the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. As we pushed on at 12,000 feet, we tickled the underbelly of the clouds. We Kansas boys were a little short of breath, but only because the scenery was so breathtaking. Tire placement was critical for the Rebel to avoid rocker panel damage. It had way too many close calls.
Oh.
The Jeep, on the other hand, the north side of Hickerman Pass saw rain and sleet. The roads cut through open ranches with walking stakes. I recently upgraded to an ARB fridge from a Yeti cooler. The added weight and size of the fridge are offset by the convenience of not dealing with ice. My food won't get soggy from ice water, and half the food storage space isn't consumed by ice. South of Gypsum on 410, the road was made of the same red clay you see in Moab. It was wet and slippery, and Rich said driving on it was one of the scariest things he's done in his life. If it weren't for the ruts, he would have slid off the road. My KO2s gripped with confidence. By Gypsum, my Jeep was caked in mud. We washed our rig so we weren't leaving mud on the streets as we moved to the next trailhead. Rain was our new normal. Gone was the dry warmth of southern Colorado. Each trip, my Jeep's load gets heavier as I give into gear creep. My rig weighs too much, and I need to trim the excess and learn to do without. North of State Bridge, we finally hit snow. Something about it made me giddy. I was constantly getting out and shooting video. In hindsight, that was poor practice because I wasn't communicating that to Rich.
You hear me?
I missed his call over the radio that he was clearing a downed tree from the trail and needed assistance. I arrived in time to have missed the sawing.
I trimmed all the branches off of it too, so I don't have to worry about a puncture. That was my workout for the day.
Whoa. The icy trails were slowing us down. The Rebel's tires weren't gripping or cleaning well, and it was risking sliding off the roads. Not wanting to get stuck in the mud in this weather, we decided to make camp. Radium Campground was the closest option, but it was exposed on the mountainside and had little shelter from the storm. We pressed on to Lynx Campground.
Did you think you'd be seeing this in October?
After a day of mud and snow, my RTT's cover straps were locked in ice and grit. However, the warm, cozy tent was worth the setup discomfort. Of course, by morning, the cover was frozen rigid and was like wrestling a muddy tarpaulin putting on. Day 4. What was supposed to be a saunter from Lynx Campground to Steamboat Springs and then a casual drive home ended with my Jeep on a flatbed.
Well, the Jeep broke down. I'm 10 minutes south of Lehman on I-70. I heard a loud clank, and then I lost power steering, and my temperature shot up. So I pulled to the side of the road, and I radioed ahead to Rich. Rich, I've got a problem. I think my Jeep's on fire. There was smoke coming out of the hood, smoke coming out of the back of the Jeep. I radioed ahead to him that I had a problem. So he was able to pull over. I had my fire extinguisher, slowly pumped my hood. Luckily, there was no fire, but there was coolant everywhere from the radiator cap venting the coolant. Come to find out, my idler pulley, the bearing on it seized up and shattered, and that's that clanking, was that bearing exploding. Then the idler pulley melted from my belt, slipping around it. So here I am on the side of the road, waiting for Rich to, he was able to find an auto parts store with a new idler pulley. It's an hour-and-a-half round trip for him, so I've got time to kill. But I'm just glad that we had those radios to communicate. Without that, I would have been able to tell him the problems that I had. We don't have cell coverage out here. So I was able to radio ahead to him, hey Rich, I've got a problem. We figured out a plan of action and execute it. So without those Midland GMRS radios, this would be a really long night. Now it's a not so long night, but it'll still be kind of long. So for now, I'm gonna go make a sandwich, top off my coolant, and then we're gonna get the Jeep back together, find a place to rest for the night, and hit the road tomorrow.
The clerk gave Rich the wrong pulley, so an hour-and-a-half was wasted. I decided to get a tow to a more secure location while Rich drove back to O'Reilly's. It's 5 a.m. We're at Love's Travel Shop in Bennett, Colorado. The tow last night was a little expensive. It was $225 plus $5 a mile. So $350 later, here we are. It's a good place. We were able to get some rest. Rich slept in his truck. I slept in the Jeep. I didn't want to pitch the tent. I didn't want to pitch a tent. Anyway, so we're gonna get it fixed up. The auto parts stores don't open up for another 4 hours, so we're gonna get this fixed with what we have. Rich was able to get a replacement idler pulley last night, and then we'll just get this fixed up and get it home. Resting the night at the truck stop was the right move. We had access to flush toilets and warm food. The repair was quick, and we hit the road.
All right.
It rained the entire 9-hour drive home, filling my snorkel with water. Unbeknownst to me, my head gasket cooked when my Jeep overheated. It was another 2,000 miles before I learned that, which meant the engine was toast. The Colorado Backcountry Discovery Route is the Baskin Robbins of adventure travel. You flavor every biome. It can be done in any stock 4x4 over a long weekend, but you'll want a week to savor Colorado's majesty. The Ram and Jeep each had winning and losing traits. The rigs fit their driver's persona and delivered another memorable trip. I have a growing adventure travel appetite, and the Colorado Backcountry Discovery Route was the sampler platter I needed. Remember to support local businesses, tread lightly and respectfully, and get out there and explore. Thanks for watching. See you on the trail.
Ow! Oh, my hip.